Welcome to Culture Conversations, a podcast that helps disciples make disciples in today's world.
All right, friends, welcome to another episode of Culture Conversations. I'm here with my friend Mike Larsen. He's from LA. He does know Snoop Dogg. Just kidding. And we're gonna talk about a lot, but first, Mike, I'd really love to hear how you came to faith. You have such a unique story. And man, why don't you just tell everybody watching and listening how you came to faith and how you came to know Christ?
Yeah, so in the 90s, I was introduced to methamphetamines, and I just gave every meaningful relationship up and for that drug.
How old were you?
I was 19. Yep, I had a child that had just been born. I was married at the time.
You were married at 19?
I was. Wow. And we had my oldest, Daniel. And yeah, I was working for my uncle's moving company, and my coworker introduced me to meth. And as soon as I did it, I knew that I was in love with it.
Wow.
And
is it in California?
Yeah. Yeah, this is Southern California. And then, yeah, and so, man, it was like I did everything I could to get that, hustled my way through life, quit the job, left my family, left my kid, and just, it was really like roaming from house to house, selling drugs and doing drugs to the point where, I just gave up my whole life for it.
It was all consuming.
All consuming. So I just hustled my way through it. I stole what I could to support. And in 1998, and I say stole, but I did big crimes in the end because I got more desperate. And so there was a person that we had moved. He was a doctor in the community. And I remember when we moved his house, we moved literally like 200 carbine rifles. And we put it all in this walk-in closet in his house. And so there was a time where my uncle another uncle of mine gave me a job doing landscaping while I was steep in my addiction. And I recognized the house. And we were doing this guy's backyard, landscaping his backyard. And I knew this house was the place. And so I excused myself to the restroom and I went to go scout this place for the weapons. This would be like a huge score, right? And I went into the master bathroom and went into the master closet, and there was nothing in the closet to the exception of a jewelry box. And so I flipped open the jewelry box, and there was two rings. And I grabbed one, put it in my pocket, closed the box, and I was going to plot to come back and get anything else I could in the house. And so I stole their garage door opener. And so got through the day of working and went home to my second wife. It's a tangled web.
How old were you then?
Oh gosh, I was 25, 25 years old.
It's about 6 years.
So 6 years in my addiction, and found I divorced my first wife, found a girl that did drugs too, and married her. And so I could have this lifestyle and a woman. That would be great. And, or I thought it would be. And it was a train wreck. So I ended up going home that night, and my mom called me and asked me if I was at home. And I said, yeah. And she showed up at my house about 20 minutes later with the cops behind her. And so they arrested me, and I gave the ring back. My mom had asked me, did I steal the ring? I said, yes. And so 20 minutes later, she comes with the cops. And so I ended up in jail.
Did they have cameras or something?
No, they just knew it was my uncle, and we were the only two there, you know? And so obviously my Uncle Jim isn't taking it.
Right.
And everybody knows I'm an addict at this point.
Right.
My mom knew it. You know, my Uncle Jim was just trying to give me a break.
Sure. Which
he always has. And then, so I find myself in jail for the first time. And and so that led to that.
How long did you do?
They sentenced me to, they charged me grand theft.
Okay.
The first charge was burglary, and that would have been a strike and prison. But they reduced it because I had never been to jail before. Gave me grand theft, and I did a year in the county jail.
Okay.
It was there that, I know this sounds really tangled, but I had my wife and I also had a girlfriend. And I know it's awful, but
did your wife know?
No, not really. They knew each other. Okay. But it was in jail that I was writing her and my wife, and I was convinced in jail that I didn't want to do this anymore. And the first time they put me in this tank of first-time offenders, and it's like the boys' locker room, just really loud. People they're just being boys, right? And so I asked an old timer that was in there. I said, how do you get moved out of this dorm? And he says, well, there's two ways. You get in a fight and you get thrown in a hole, or you get released. And I said, well, I'm not getting released anytime soon. So first guy that walked in front of me, I just started wailing on him until the cops came in and pulled me off. And that old man was right. My next destination was the hole. It was there that these trustees would like throw books underneath. They take everything from you, so you had nothing. But the trustees would throw books underneath the door. And there was one book in particular there. It was called God's Prison Gang. And as the story goes, the book is about high-profile crimes. So Pretty Boy Floyd. There was this story in there about Jack Murphy. They called him Murph the Surf Murphy. They made a movie in the early 70s about him. He had stole the Hope Diamond out of the New York History Museum. He was a cat burglar and just a hustler. That's how he explained himself. And he ended up stealing that Hope Diamond and then getting away with it. Well, his buddies ratted him off and he ended up going to prison. Well, it was in prison that he found Jesus, and that's what the book is about. I had nothing, I didn't hear anything about the Jesus stuff. All I saw was this professional diamond thief, and here I am in jail for stealing jewelry, and I was going to case the place to steal more. And I thought, I am a pro can't get away with this. Who do I think I am?
Right.
And I was sobering up, and once you sober up off of meth, you do start thinking straight. And I just said, you know what, I'm done with this lifestyle. And so I kept writing Sheila, and my
That's your wife?
Yeah, that's my wife now, who was my girlfriend then. All of us were using dope. And I put just ultimatums out on the letters, telling each one that I was done. And Sheila wrote me back with a letterhead. She got a job, and she said she's done too.
Wow. And
my now ex-wife, she wasn't done with drugs, and she continued to do drugs, sadly, for a long time after that. But Sheila came and picked me up from jail in 1998.
How long did you do? What was the full sentence? A year?
It was they gave me a little bit more than a year because I got in that fight.
Okay.
So they extended, I think, 30 days on my sentence.
Okay. How long were you in the hole?
I was in the hole for like 6 weeks. Yeah.
Describe that for people.
Yeah, it's a different kind of animal because as much as I hated the crowd, I think I hated the silence even worse. And so every book that they gave me, I just ran through and just kept reading. I don't even know how I graduated from high school because I don't ever remember reading books from front to back. But I read The River Runs Through It like 18 times. Wow. Because and that's a thick book for a kid that has never read a book all the way through. But
so you're just by yourself. There's no one to talk to.
Yeah.
The lights go out and the lights go on, and that's your life.
You get 3 meals. You get an hour a day if everything's perfect in there. You get an hour to get out, and what they say is get some sunlight, but it's really not sunlight. It's weird.
Are you with other people in that hour?
Yeah, it's a pod full of people. No, but you're individual out there in your hour. And so if there's any discipline going on, no one goes out. But but typically we got to get our hour because, and that's where our shower was.
Okay.
So you were really hoping that nobody was stupid in there because you really wanted your shower. You wanted your hour, just to get out of that room. And then so.
Did you spend your whole sentence in the hole?
No, just 6 weeks. It was just disciplinary.
Gotcha.
And then they moved me to another jail to serve my time. And so I served the rest of my time. I got a job in the kitchen, which was a godsend because most of the fights and the problems and the troubles happen during the day when people are up, and the kitchen crew is up at 2 a.m. and in bed by 8.
Nice.
In the morning. And so that saved me because as much as I really wanted to succeed at not getting back in that lifestyle, and it's so influential in jail, that people just come out being stronger criminals.
Mm-hmm. And make all those connections.
Yeah, make all the connections. And all these guys in county are going to get out soon, so they all have plans. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, well, it's just tempting. And so I was grateful for that time. Hindsight's very much 2020 when it comes to that stuff. So Sheila came and visited me a couple of times and then picked me up. It was on my birthday. I remember that I got released, and so she picked me up. And
you're 27 now?
Yeah, 27 years old at the time. Gosh, it just seems like a lifetime ago. And then I moved in with her at her parents' house, and we did. We managed to stay clean, get jobs.
Nice.
And
without Jesus.
Without Jesus. I had court order like AA or NA, and I just didn't really need it. I was done. I mean, I made my decision, and I was sticking to it. And so I actually went back to work for my uncle.
Wow.
At the moving company.
That's grace.
Yeah, and worked there for a while, and then ended up getting my commercials driver's license, and started my trucking career.
Nice.
In 2000, I think that was 1999.
Okay.
Yep, when I started driving truck, and so it was. I think it was right around that time that I ended up wanting to get a tattoo. And so it was 2000. And so I went into this local tattoo shop in my town, and I had no idea who this guy was. I never met him. I did have a pattern in mind that I wanted to get. Mm-hmm. And he had, I asked him, I said, how much for the tattoo? And he looked at it and he said, it's kind of big, so I don't know exactly how much it would cost, but I'll keep track of the time and we'll just charge you $100 an hour.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it was a great deal. I'm like, okay, cool. Sounds great. And so I scheduled an appointment for the next day. And so that was a Saturday that I went in, and he started tattooing on me. And so there was small talk, getting to know him. What's your name? My name's Kelly. I said, we were just talking a little bit, and he finally starts tattooing on me, and I start noticing that some people are coming into his shop, and they're asking him the same thing, the same question as I asked that Friday. And he said, they're like, Kelly, how much for this tattoo? And he said, oh, I don't know. It's a pretty big piece. How about we schedule a time, and we'll just keep track of the time, and I'll charge you $50 an hour. And I'm like, oh, wow, this must be like really good friends, that's cool. Got the bro deal, He was a biker dude. He looked really cool. He was all, yeah. And so the next person comes in, and it's the same question and the same answer. Kelly, how much for this tattoo? He's like, I don't know. We'll just keep track of the time. $50 an hour, $50 an hour. Third person, fourth person, same question, same answer. And finally, I'm like, who are these people? And he goes, oh, these are people from my church. You should come check it out. And I'm like, well, maybe I should. And
maybe get $50 off on your next session.
Right. I was attracted, what I know now is I was attracted to the grace that Kelly was giving to his brothers and sisters in the church.
Yeah.
And for me, just being an old hustler of the streets, I'm thinking, heck yeah, I could friend this guy and he'll hook me up with cheaper tattoos.
Right.
This is dope, man. Let's do it, right? I got this. And so he was really cool. I thought, man, it'd be great to get to know the guy. He's got his big old chopper sitting outside. I'm like, man, this is really cool stuff. And so the next day, we go to his church, Sheila and I. It was just a little tiny church. I mean, it's scary. I mean, there was a bunch of bikers, and it was on the dirt road, and it was just really weird. But
were you a biker at the time or
no? No, not at all. Never rode a bike. We rode dirt bikes as a kid, but that's it. But we get there, and we're greeted by Kelly, and he's like trying to introduce me to everybody. The pastor comes up, and he's this guy that looks like Willie Nelson and George Carlin had a baby. It was just like, and he was just a cool dude, man, little short guy. And immediately all these people just want to give you big old hugs, those Christian hugs that are all extended. They just hold it for a little bit longer. And I'm just like, this is kind of weird.
It's weird,
but
man. It's awkward.
It's weird, it's awkward, but I mean, if this is it, I can handle this, like whatever. And just so happened to be Easter Sunday that week. And so they did this altar call, and Kelly got me up there and drugged me up to the front and made me pray the sinner's prayer. And I was just like, I didn't know what I was doing, man. And so we left, and I was just like asking Sheila, what'd you think? I mean, kind of cool, right? And we agreed, yeah, it was kind of cool. It was okay, and I really seriously thought, I'm like, man, this is going to be neat to get to be Kelly's friend. And I'm going to get a whole lot of tattoos from him. And it's going to be cheap. It's going to be cheap. It's going to have a discount. And so that was the sole reason why I went to church. It's the sole reason why I went to church. Again, I was attracted to the graceful gift that he was given to his brothers and sisters. So we kept going back. They invited us to a Bible study, midweek Bible study. We went to that. And I was really curious. I haven't had any church history really in my background. So other than some family members that I knew were Catholic.
Okay.
And so I'm like, okay, so prayer was somewhat part of the family stuff. And so I'm like, okay, this isn't all completely foreign, but I really wasn't understanding any of it. It was about a month or two later, can't really recall, but Kelly asked me if I wanted to be part of their motorcycle ministry. And so they have a motorcycle ministry, and they minister to outlaw bikers.
Nice.
Yeah, they outreach to outlaw bikers. And it's really, really cool thing. But I'm like, man, this is getting cooler by the minute. I've never rode a bike, but I'll be down. Like, let's do it. Tattoos and motorcycles and friendly people. This is great.
Right.
All these guys, the way these guys look, I recall their looks from my druggy days, and they were all drug heads. And so to be surrounded by the same type of people, but without that negative influence was just awesome.
Yeah.
And so I agreed immediately, man. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. And so they assign you an older brother, they call it, and you're going to become a younger brother. And the older brother is meant to disciple you and just kind of show you the ropes of the ministry. Well, the first thing he asked me to do is get a biker vest, a notepad, a pen, and a pocket Bible, and have all three of those. Have all those things. And you have to have your notepad and your pen, and your pocket Bible in your vest, and you got to be wearing that when you're ministering and when you're at the church. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, the way it all worked out is when you would show up on a Sunday, all the bikers would circle up, and they kind of just debrief you of the day, what's going to go on, and they'll assign people some posts or whatever, and some welcoming things, and where these bikers would welcome in the cars, and then inevitably that one of the older brothers would ask a younger brother to pull out their Bible and read from a passage of scripture, and but I couldn't find a Bible for the life of me. I got my vest, I got my pen, I got my notepad, but I couldn't find a Bible anywhere. And I was afraid to ask anybody because, as word has it or rumor had it, if you didn't have the things that your older brother asked you to have, that they would discipline you. And I'm like, what do you mean discipline? And so they were like parking duty in North 40, you'd be pulling weeds or you'd be doing something, taking out the trash. And I'm just like, that's just humiliating. And I think what really scared me the most was when we circled up. And there was like, seriously, there'd be upwards to 30 bikers sitting around there. And then I'm just trying to avoid eye contact with my older brother. His name was Gunner. He was a Vietnam vet. If you saw him, if you see him even today from across the street, you'd avoid him.
Looks like a dangerous
He
dude.
just looks like a dangerous dude. But, oh man, don't judge a book by his cover. He is one of the sweetest men. God has regenerated that man's heart. And he is just one of the sweetest men that I know. At any rate, I didn't really know him that well at the time, and I'm just avoiding eye contact with him every time we circled up. And the truth is that I don't know how long I would have lasted there if he would have called me out and humiliated me in front of all them men. And that's what I was afraid of. In my time of being around people like that, those were fighting things, like we're gonna box now, bro. Like, right. And Gunner's an old dude, man. I didn't want to fight an old dude. And that's what's really going through my head. I'm like, wow, I'm gonna have to box this guy up and put him in his place. Like, that's so disrespectful. Like, but he's gonna humiliate me, and that's gonna be disrespectful. And so it goes both ways in that world. And so, man, I'm just seriously like, just please don't call me. Just please don't call me. And thankfully, he never did, man. There was it was about the 5th or 6th week that we're circling up, and I'm stressed out and I'm freaking out. And we get through the circle, we get through the church service, and I just kind of beelined it to the car, and I took my vest off and left Sheila home with our kids, and I took that vest off, and I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I prayed for the first time, and I just looked up to the sky and I said, God, if you're real, and I'm embarrassed to say, I really said this, I said, man up, and you give me this Bible. I don't suggest anybody ask God to man up. That's kind of odd and disrespectful. But that's what I said.
That's real. That's true.
That's what I said. Right? I said, man up, you give me this Bible. And I said, no tattoo's worth it. And so I get in the car, and I'm waiting for Sheila to get our boys in the car, and she does. And she knows I'm visibly just upset and frustrated. And she had promised the kids John's Incredible Pizza. And this is like video games and bumper cars and pizza and playrooms and all this stuff, and I just didn't want to be there, so we just start arguing all the way there. And Sheila wins because she's mom, and we end up at John's Incredible Pizza. And so we pull into the parking lot, and I open up my door and I leave it open because I'm just basically being a jerk. And I open up my son's door, and I start working on getting him out of his car seat. Meanwhile, a brown 4-door Honda Accord, I still see it today, pulls up right next to me, and his window's down. And I remember telling him, I said, sir, I'm gonna be out of your way in just a minute until let me get my kid out, and I'll get out of your way. And I remember him saying, as clear as day, still hear it. He says, it's Sunday and I'm in no hurry. I had no idea what that meant, but it stuck with me. And I said, okay. And so finally I wrangled my son out, and I sent him to the door of the pizza place and closed both doors, and I'm waiting for Sheila to get our other son out. And I get a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and here's this 5'0", 80-year-old man, and he has a pocket Bible in his hand, and he looked me dead square in the eyes, and he said, the Father told me to give this to you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. This is just after you prayed that day.
Yeah, 20 minutes after I cried out the sky and asked God to man up. And by God's grace, he sent that dude that day. It was incredible.
What'd you do?
It still gets me. But for the first time in a long time, I cried. And I can't remember the last time I cried.
Right.
And I grabbed that little man up and gave him one of those weird, long, extended hugs that y'all do.
Give him the Christian hug.
Give him one of them Christian hugs, and I thanked him for the Bible. And interesting enough, he got back in his car, pulled out and left. And his wife was in the car, I noticed that. And I said, I didn't understand it. I just didn't really understand it. So I'm just really crazy, like something's hitting me emotionally. And here's this Bible just out of the air, out of nowhere. Here's this man who has no fear of a guy my size. And, just if you'd have saw me back then, you'd be like, dang, I'm going to steer clear of him too. And, but it just happened. And I just started contemplating it, and I was like, okay, man, this really happened. I guess God is real. I guess God is real. And then I dared to pray another prayer that day. Just thinking on the fact that man took a left into a parking lot that he had no earthly business being in. Like, he was on a mission from God. Like I'm sure 80-year-old people love pizza and beer and video games, but
not the kids one, not the
bouncing
kids, right? The rowdy kids.
No, probably not. And then him leaving. And so I was just like, man, that just kept stirring in my head and in my heart. And I said, God, if you'll allow me to take left-hand turns into places where I have no earthly business being, but you send me, and then I could be sensitive enough to hear you go say, go left, do that. I said, I want to do that.
Wow.
That was special. I want to do that. That was like extra special. That was just awesome. I want to do that. And
be the answer to someone else's prayer.
Yeah. And, and to be able to deliver something like that with God's help, and just have an ear to hear the Holy Spirit's nudging to take a left. Honey, I got to go here. And he's in no hurry. It's Sunday. Like, Sunday must be my day that I just listen to the Lord and I go where he tells me to go. I mean, I don't know. I've never seen the guy since then. But since then, God has asked me to take a lot of left-hand turns that made no earthly business. And that was like really, so that was my dedication. I just said, Lord, let me take those left-hand turns. And so that ended up going into prison ministry was the first one for me.
Wow.
So going back to the jails, I started in LA County, and I thought God set me up in that one. I was learning a little bit about repentance and sin, and I thought that he opened the door for prison ministry for me so that I can go in there and remember all the crap I did in prison, in jail, and just confess that. And then I promised that I'd never go back. And then like 4 months later, I'm back in the prisons again, serving. And oddly enough, I did that for 5 years. We would go up and down Southern California state penitentiaries, preaching the gospel and evangelizing. And oddly enough, the Surf Murphy was one of the headline speakers.
No way.
Yeah.
You got to meet him.
I got to
Did you tell him the story?
I did. He actually had copies of those books, and he signed it for me. I still have it on my shelf. Great dude, just ambassador for Jesus, and that's all he did before he passed was ministering to the prisons. Yeah, interesting stuff. But yeah, my life has been a series of left-hand turns since then too. And so pastoral ministry was one of those.
Before you go there, I'm interested, because if I recall us talking in the past, was that not a Gideon's Bible? Yeah.
Okay. So we were doing some street evangelism in Central California, and we were parked had a booth right next to a Gideon camp, and I just never put two and two together with these guys, and so I knew obviously it said Gideon's on the Bible, and then so I was there at this parade that we were evangelizing at, and they were there, and I'm like, hey, I got one of those Bibles. Let me tell you how I got it. And so I shared my testimony with the guy that was there. And then he said, wow, we'd love for you to come out to our camp meeting and share that testimony with our members. They'd be really encouraged. And so I agreed, and I went to their camp meeting. It was in Tehachapi, California. And I shared that testimony. And then the word got out about my testimony. And the Gideons really love testimony speakers for the encouragement reasons.
Sure.
And so I ended up getting offers like every other weekend to come out to camp meetings to share that testimony. And that turned into like state conferences. And then it turned into, and it turned into this 3-year like circuit that I was doing every other weekend while working a full-time job. And they're flying me out and paying me for it. And they're like, the money was really good for a guy who's driving a truck.
Sure.
I'd share that 12-minute testimony and they'd give me $300 and feed me and fly me back home. And
that's a win.
I was like, that's a win. And so I ended up like 3 years in, and I was doing the California Gideon's State Conference in California. It was in Palm Springs, California. And I was the first testimony speaker. The second testimony speaker was Ryan Reese. He is the son of Raul Reese, and Raul Reese is a pretty famous Calvary Chapel pastor in Southern California, on the radio, and his son, he's pretty popular right now too. He's got a pretty good ministry going on. Great guy. Well, he has a testimony. Ryan's got a testimony like mine. Ryan used to own Osiris. He owned Osiris skating equipment. Okay. And he was on the Vans Warped Tour, put a lot of cocaine up his nose, and it came to the end of his drug use, and he stole the Gideon Bible, and his claim is that he got saved on a plane.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Reading a stolen Gideon's Bible.
Yeah, the Gideons love
awesome.
that, by the way, man.
I'll bet.
When they say, they love that because they put the Bibles in the hotels, right? Mm-hmm. And so Ryan, I share my testimony. Ryan shares his testimony. And his dad, Raul, gets up there, Pastor Raul Reese, and he starts preaching on the importance of getting the word of God into the hands of people. And in a sense that I've never heard it before, because he started explaining it as John 1, the word of God that spoke all things into existence. Like he starts in Genesis and then he comes over to John 1, and then he says, the word of God became flesh and dwelt among us. And for the first time ever, I connected this Bible to Jesus. Now I had this Christian testimony, this answered prayer, but I was being convicted at that moment, really even crushed in spirit. Like I felt heavy conviction that I had this testimony, but I didn't know this Jesus that Raul was talking about. And I ended up driving home from Palm Springs that day, and I'm just like, what in the world is going on in my heart right now? And I felt like I just need to start reading this Bible. And I got home and was greeted by Sheila. She greeted me at the door, and she immediately says, look, she says, when you're done saving the world, your family might be here.
Wow.
And so this whole thing's like coming down now from now my family, and now this weird conviction that I've never felt before. Like, and so I'm just like, God couldn't possibly ask me to sacrifice my family for $300 on a weekend, right? And I'm like, so I said, I'll stop it all. I just don't know what's going on. I shared through my conviction too. I'm like, I'm just gonna I'm gonna stop doing this. I'm gonna stop doing the Gideon stuff. And I just think I just need to read this Bible. And she was like up to here with my traveling and not being home with the kids. And so she's like, well, whatever, as long as you're gonna commit to being with us. So I did, and I started reading that Bible, Chris, and man, the church that the church that I was going to and where I met Kelly, their theology was whack.
But you didn't know it.
I didn't know it. I mean, there was intellectually, I'm listening to some of the stuff that they're saying. I'm going, okay, I'm going to try to trust you. But then I started reading, and I'm like, seriously, how did you come up with those conclusions? Like, that's not what it is saying.
Right. And
admittedly, I was young and still had a lot of that pride. And so I didn't handle it very well at all with these pastors, with zero respect. I just immediately was like, I started questioning them, calling them out on it.
In person?
In person, yeah. Not publicly, but in person.
Sure.
And I just couldn't see how they were coming to these conclusions. They weren't hyper Pentecostal, but they were Pentecostal in their approach to theology, and so a lot of oppression with some of the stuff. Like, if you don't have enough faith, and that's why you don't have things. Right. And I just couldn't, like, are you kidding me? That has nothing to do with this passage that you're pulling that out of the, like a rabbit out of the hat. Here, look. I'm like, that is not what it says. And it's way out of context. And I had no idea that God was bringing clarity of his word to me at the moment. And I couldn't understand why they weren't reading it that way. And so it didn't take too long before we weren't getting anywhere with the pastors. And so we decided, like, we got to leave. And so I had a friend of mine in the Christian biker world that was taking a position up in the high desert at a Reformed church. And he was a Reformed guy, didn't even know what Reformed was at the time, right? And so he asked me to come check it out, and I did. We did. And man, everything that I was reading, he was affirming in just doctrinally and theologically. And I'm like, this is legit. I mean, I was feeling that conviction again there, like I never have before. Like, yeah, now I know this Jesus, but now I think I really need to confess I need him. And so it was like the first time conviction of my own sin and my need for a savior. And that was falling over my entire family, that conviction. And so it wasn't too long after that Sheila and I and the boys were baptized.
Wow. So man, let me just open that up for a second. So do you think, at what point along that journey from that biker church, you get the Gideon's Bible, you're traveling with the Gideons, you're convicted you don't know the Jesus of the Bible, you start reading the Bible, you start coming to these, like at what point in that journey, now you're at this Reformed church, you're getting baptized, when do you think you're actually born again?
Seriously, I believe that God regenerated my heart at that Reformed church. Because I was in it for the money with the Gideons. I was in it for the money at the church. I was in it for the pleasure of riding motorcycles. I mean, even the prison ministry stuff was like, they'd let you take your motorcycles out there and show you're off. And so it's just like this real pride thing. Yeah. I would even fabricate stories of my testimony to prisoners, which is ridiculous because you can't do any worse than what they've done.
Right.
It's just stupid.
You're making it worse than
it was stupid. Was. Like they would look at me and go, I'd tell them, it was interesting. I'd tell them the story about the Bible and you'd watch people respond to that. But as I was fabricating, like I was a bigger drug dealer than I was, in the high desert, nobody responded to that. Like, and that's their normal. Like, and you don't even know, like, but when I started testifying to the truth of what happened that day, the inmates would respond to those things. But then I'd leave there going with this conviction, like, you're just a liar. You're a fake. You're a fraud. You're a fraud. And 5 years into that, they give you this cross made out of cell bars to award you for like serving for 5 years. And it's just this constant reminder that of my sin in those days.
You still have it?
I do. Yeah, it sits on my shelf today. But it was weird. Like, just, it was all about me. And
let me pause you for a second there too. So one, I think it's really interesting that God draws people in so many different ways. And here you have this like years of drawing before you were actually regenerate and born again. Yeah. Like that was what, a 5-year process maybe? We first stepped into a Reformed church in 2006. Yeah, you said about 99, 2000. Yeah. So that's one. And then like you're doing ministry as an unregenerate person, like admittedly.
Yep.
And now God is like being so kind to you as to bring you along to the truth of Jesus and his atonement and all that for you. And now you're like, I need him. Yeah. I need his grace for me. And he's doing it to your family as well at the same time. Absolutely. So he's drawing them at the same time he's drawing you. Yeah. Yeah, that's great, man. That means I'm thinking like for our people or people watching this, man, you just never know what God's doing and how he's doing it and what the process, because it's so different for everybody.
Yeah. And I say never give up on God. I mean, I was giving my wife every reason to leave me. I was bragging about my awesomeness all the time, about what I'm doing in ministry, and everybody saw through it. You know, everybody who really knew me saw through it. And then so I say that there's the old saying, fake it till you make it. God is faithful.
Yeah,
even when we're faking it, God is faithful, and his promises are everlasting. And so if it wasn't for God's faithfulness, I'd still be out there spinning and hustling. And that's what my whole life was until God convicted my heart of my sin and my need for him. Yeah.
So now you're at this Reformed church. You understand the gospel. You're born again. Your family is converted. And now you guys are getting baptized.
Yeah. It was interesting. We didn't announce that we were going to this church, but there was about 40 people that followed us there
from the biker church.
Wow. And God really after that gave me a heart for them because I thought, man, I need to disciple these dudes because they're indoctrinated with bad doctrine, you know, and I don't know about their salvation, but I do know about mine. And so I just started asking the leaders there, and the leaders obviously put eyes on me because at this point I was ordained as a pastor at the biker church. And so I had Pastor Mike on my chest, on my biker vest. I immediately took that off because I didn't want to be associated with this church because of what I was reading and some of the confusion that I was seeing. And so I took all that off. And so by the time I got to this church, I'm just like, and listening to this pastor preach and teach and serve, I'm like, don't call me a pastor. Like, I am not a pastor. Like, and so I was really adamant about that. But these 40 people or so were still calling me Pastor.
They saw
Mike.
you as that, yeah.
And so that put a spotlight on me, along with 40 people coming to your church in 1 or 2 weekends. That's quite a deal, right? And so the lead pastor immediately puts his arm around me. He's like, hey, let's go do lunch, you know? Right. And so I'm having the convictions. I'm not a pastor, man. You know, I couldn't hold a candle up to this guy and his preaching and teaching, and just a wonderful Bible teacher. And so he just started befriending me, asked Sheila and I to join his community group, you know, and he just started putting me around leaders. Nice. And that was super helpful because I immediately started to get discipled by Pastor Jeff Ludington. And then I was taking what I was learning from Jeff and distributing it to the people that I was bringing.
Those 40.
Yeah, those 40. Yeah. And so I was just regurgitating because it was so good. And so we would hold a biker breakfast. Like we brought all these bikers to this Reformed church. It was a mess, a little messy. Dudes wearing bandanas, like next to a guy wearing a suit. It was
That's cool, man.
It was cool, not for the person wearing the suit.
I can imagine, right. Not that old time church guy yet.
And so we had to teach like reverence, you know, just like to the bikers, like, hey, you don't need to wear a bandana in there, man, and you can love your neighbor by not scaring them. You know, like seriously, right. You don't have to be scary. Like we had some scary dudes that hung around us, and so, but yeah, so there was a lot of teaching, a lot of discipling there on how to love your neighbor in those ways, and so eventually there was a lot of people that came around because these are great people too, you know, and we could learn a lot as a biker community from these folks that have had marriages for 30 years, you know, like
absolutely
wonderful stuff. And so it was a few years, or it wasn't too long before Jeff asked me if I wanted to commission as a pastor in their denomination.
What denomination was it?
It was the Reformed Church of America. RCA. Mm-hmm. And so, which we're not part of anymore, which that's another podcast for another time. But so he asked me, and we prayed for a while and fasted, and if this was the route for us. And so finally it was affirmed that I would do that. And so that was about a 3-year process for me.
Okay.
And Jeff just gave me some simple instructions, and it was 2 things. He said, I need you to pour out everything you know, or you think you know, as far as theology and doctrine and ecclesiology and church and all that stuff. And he didn't use those words because I didn't understand them at the time. But I want you to pour all that stuff out. And then the second thing is, he says, and I can't have you on any stage while you're going through this. So you have to agree to not be on any stage. And I said, I thought to myself, as soon as this guy hears me preach, he's going to tell my stories, he'll have me up there in no time. Yeah, still a lot of pride. Yeah, I was going through it. But it was like 3.5 years later before he let me preach.
So he was just discipling you, pouring in, reading books, I'm sure. And
lots of books. Yeah, Jeff was actually the leadership development guy of our region at the time. So I was like his crash test dummy when it come to the syllabus. Cool. And it was good because I'm getting so much, you know, and it was so rich, a time of learning. And I preached that message. And, you know, if you're in a church for some time, like 3.5 years is a long time to get to know a lot of people, and you learn to respect a lot of people. And so you're like, you look at some people like matriarchs and patriarchs of the church, you're just like, oh man, these are seriously awesome Christians. And so it was interesting. I preached that message, and I can't even remember what I preached on, but I started getting all these emails in my inbox. And Chris, there was like, seriously, like 60 emails, and the majority of them was like, why'd you say this?
Oh, wow.
Why'd you say that? They're criticism.
Oh, no.
Not, I mean, very little encouragement. And from people that you like in the community that you're like, whoa. And so I gathered up all those emails, and I was just like, whoa, these people hate me, you know? And God's still like digging the root out of this self-pride and this people-pleasing type of thing that I need people's approval, right? And so I'm taking all this in, and I take it all to Jeff, and I said, hey dude, I'm out. I'm not doing this pastoral thing anymore.
Did he read the emails and whatnot?
No, not until afterwards. But he says, what are you talking about? And I said, that sermon sucked. Everybody hated it. And he goes, yeah, but it wasn't good. You need a lot of work, but what do you mean you're going to quit? And then that's when I showed him the emails. I'm like, look, dude, I've got all these emails of everybody, a lot of people in this church, and they're telling me how bad I am. And he said something that changed my life. He said, Mike, who gives these people permission to speak authoritatively in your life? And I had to take that in for a minute. And then he says, why do all these people have a voice in your life?
Wow.
And so we had to really work through the idea of me receiving affirmation from the people who really love me, and even criticism of the people who love me. And so Jeff just said, you know, Mike, you need to pick your people who get to speak into your life authoritatively. He goes, you know, if that could be me. We've spent 3.5 years together, and you don't get to quit. You know, and that could be your wife. You know, you need to give her permission to speak. That, you know, and then you pick your people. But they can't tell you what to do. The crowd can't tell you what to do. And that was transformative for me.
How long did that take to actually root in you and become something you actually believed and lived out? Was it immediate?
I don't think so. I think I still struggle with it today. I still struggle with affirmation today. It's one of those deep-rooted sins. It's a weakness. It's something I struggle with.
Yeah, everybody. A lot of people do, if they're honest. Yeah,
I think it is. I'm the words of affirmation guy when you take the test.
The love languages.
Languages, right?
Yeah.
And so,
words is your number one.
Yeah, it's my number one. And so,
which is nothing wrong, by the way, with words of affirmation.
I agree.
Like, that's a good thing.
I agree. I had a really good friend of mine say, when people thank you, it's actually like God saying thank you. And, you know, like that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if God's people, if God speaks through God's people, then take the gratitude.
Yeah, we can receive that.
We can receive it.
Absolutely.
We can receive it.
Yeah.
And so, but we don't need it.
That's the difference.
Yeah. We don't need it because we have God's exception, and we have God's, but you know, humanly speaking, I struggle there. COVID was a big one for that. Yeah. COVID revealed a lot of my chinks in my armor. And,
you want to open that up at all?
Can. I mean, it's short, but you know, all the changes that COVID went through. I'm in the church as I'm leading this church. I have my gift sets, right? And that's organizing leaders around assimilating new visitors in, you know, and just getting all that going. And we have a really good thing going. And then COVID throws everything in the air, right? And so it was just one day that I just felt like every bit of my giftedness is useless right now. And I just felt useless. We had one Sunday that it just went, everything was going wrong. We were outside, it's now gonna rain, we need to find inside, we're not gonna have live service, we're not gonna have people here. And I don't know what came over me, but I started preaching and I had a full-on panic attack. I thought I was having a heart attack.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Did you stop preaching or did you keep going?
I actually gathered myself, started breathing again. That's really what was going on. I was just out of breath. And I finished. But the next day I found myself in my doctor's office because I didn't know what happened to me. But so I don't know how that's tied to like the people please, but the value and worth thing, I ain't got nothing. Like I can't bring anything to this. I'm preaching to a camera right now. Right. You know, like this is so weird. Like I love the people. I serve the people. That's what I do. You know, I shepherd people. And now I don't have any people.
Right.
And so it was just really strange. Like, so kind of an identity crisis again, and needing a little bit more affirmation, if you want to tie that together. But that led to a full-on, I'm losing it. 48 years old, and I ain't got nothing to bring. That's hard to,
right?
You know, that's hard. So yeah, so it revealed some things in me, and I had to get some help. Yeah.